The AAAs, they have a very set way of working that might need to, be challenged a bit in terms of the workflow. I think it is the most exciting for like the mid-size and maybe the smaller ones, mid-size, who want to fight above their weight class. You can do more, you work faster, you can build bigger environments, the same quality as you've done before. That's like our goal there. To do all these like in-game, today we have two main ways. It's our API, which you can plug into anything. And then for Unity specifically, we have a runtime local generation solution. So you can build this locally on the device. It's optimized to be fast and on low-end devices too.
Welcome to a new episode of XR AI Spotlight, the show that gives a stage to the founders and makers pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli, I'm your host, and I'm here today with Andreas Edesberg. Andreas is the co-founder and CEO of Sloyd. With over 300,000 users globally, Sloyd is on a mission to make 3D asset creation accessible, quick, and easy. But are they living up to the expectation and needs of studio and 3D artists? What about a future where worlds are created in real time? Today, we will dive deep into this topic and discuss how Sloyd is giving more control to the style of 3D generated assets.
The style is in the proportions, and then you can prompt on that. Then you mentioned the wackiness slider, which is kind of cool, especially for a cartoony look where you can make things even more asymmetrical. Then you have the textures that will handle another big chunk of the style, going from realistic to stylized or cartoony or everything in between. A big part of when you do projection texturing, which is what Gen AI solutions use today, you generate textures for a house, for example. You get the UV map, and there's some roof over here, there's some roof over there, and some roof over here, and it's not really meant to be worked on. For us, the roof is like there.
The main use case for 3D asset generated with Sloyd.
It's roughly two main use cases. It's production phase, you just want to speed up your production, you want to be faster at making games or making content in 3D. And then it's the runtime aspect, which is going kind of more back to our initial vision of creating games instantly at runtime in real time. Oh, and actually one more.
And the dramatically different approach they have taken when compared to other generative AI tools.
We have taken quite a different approach. It came out of an idea of making this type of GTA type game where all the content is generated as you play. But to do that, obviously you need tons of optimization, you need game-ready assets, and you need speed. You have all the kind of AI NPCs, and even campaigns in some cases are dynamically created. If you pair that with the content creation itself, man, that's just crazy to think about.
But before we get into it, I wanted to thank our sponsor Meshy, who made this episode possible. Meshy is a real powerhouse for generating 3D assets with AI. You can start with a simple text or image prompt and get high-quality stylized 3D models in just a minute. One feature I personally love is the ability to create stylized texture for any mesh, with or without UV. And since the release, Meshy's teams keep pushing amazing updates like texture inpainting, ultra-realistic sculpture, and the ability to rig and animate your character. To try it out, go to meshy.ai and start the 7 days trial to access all these incredible features. And now it's time to roll the title and welcome Andreas under the spotlight. Andreas, it's a real pleasure to have you here.
What an intro. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, and well deserved. So I have been playing around with Sloyd in the past, and I've been very pleased with the way it approaches the generation of 3D assets in a different way than many other generative AI tools. So what is the approach that Sloyd has taken, and how does that differ from other deep learning methods, for example?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. We have taken quite a different approach. Maybe to explain it, it's worth kind of explaining where we started. The idea in the first place was to be able to generate 3D within games themselves, to do emergent games where the content is, there's huge amounts of content, and the entire world is generated as you play it. So it came out of an idea of making this type of GTA type game where all the content is generated as you play. So that's already quite ambitious. But to do that, obviously you need tons of optimization, you need game-ready assets, Yeah, and you need speed, extreme amount of speed. So kind of pure generative AI. This was also quite. This is like back in 2017 or so. So it's quite a far back. And so generative AI with diffusion was kind of off the table back then. So it's a mix of procedural or parametric modeling and AI. So we have objects that can be customized by AI instead of AI coming up with something from kind of thin air, from nothing, using noise and Gaussian splatting and all that stuff, which works decently well for characters and like organic shapes. Although it takes a lot of time and there's a lot of noise in the surfaces. It works fairly well for those use cases. We think that our parametric and AI approach is amazing for, typically at this point, it's best for hard surface type objects like buildings and vehicles, weapons, props and furniture and all that stuff, like everything you need to fill the world, which fit with that initial vision of creating all the stuff in the world, right? Yeah, so that's really how we do it. So instead of also using data that is kind of taken from some dubious source, we have actually paid people to make the base assets that the AI is then customizing. So it's working off of kind of pre-existing templates, as we call them, or generators, which could be a table generator, being able to create all different types of tables or rifles or types of buildings and so on. So yeah, it's a huge data set at this point.
So let's do this. I have actually a quick video that shows some of the foundation of how Sloyd works, and then we're gonna step in because I have loads of questions for you.
Let's do it.
Sloyd is a tool that generates 3D assets using a collection of customizable components. These components are created by our skilled artists with our in-house model technology, and they can be seamlessly assembled to create new and unique models. But how is this different than any other asset pack? Well, with Sloyd, not only is every model fully customizable, but even every individual part of the model is customizable too. This gives you an almost unlimited amount of variety that you can edit on the fly with immediate results. In short, Sloyd offers you the tools to truly make every model your own, but finding the right settings to make the models look exactly the way you imagined it can still be tedious at times. So we trained an AI to know about each model with all their components, sliders and toggles so that it can use all our tools to generate models based on your prompts. Now all this is done in our web app, but what about inside your packaged games like I showed in the intro? It's quite simple actually. We made it possible for users to send input prompts through our API to this AI. The AI will then create and send back the models, which will then show up in your game. In the right hands, this will create games like you've never seen before.
So there is a lot to unpack there. And before, I want to take a step back and say, so when you mention about core differences between your approach, so one being the fact that this is not trained on other 3D data. So everything is proprietary built by artists. Important. The other aspect is speed, something that people usually do not associate and is very dependent on use cases, being that in your case, it's close to instantaneous, right? In other cases, it still need to take 20, 30 seconds. And I'm not sure how far we will be able to shrink that down, if ever, to this instantaneous mode. The other thing that people do not realize is the fact about solid surfaces, that honestly, they look a bit like crap right now when you look at generative 3DI, and instead, they are much better look at organic shapes. Now, this comes at a trade-off, right? Because you have sets of assets that you can build upon, right? So what is the bottleneck on expanding that library right now?
Yeah, that's spot on. Up until now, it's been a kind of a trade-off between variety and speed optimization. All this stuff. So we've taken an approach to prioritize speed, to prioritize game-ready assets that you don't need to work on and do any manual cleanup and that kind of stuff. There's also like UV maps that are generated runtime. So
Let's not
textures are
forget
just
about that.
pushed on.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a huge deal. And we're actually launching texturing with that system finally very, very soon. Just a week or two. Final testing internally now. Um, but essentially,
By the way, by the time people are listening to this, it might already be available. So
might
go there on
already
Sloyd, check it out. There is the link down below because you're pretty sure you will see me covered in that somewhere on either LinkedIn or X. But I'm pretty
exactly.
sure to share something about it.
Yeah, and it's always in the last 10 to 20%, right? It's been very very close for a while, and now finally, I'm happy to say like I think we've ironed out most of those final things to make all the textures tile perfectly in terms of proportionality and size or whatever. All right, we can get into that. But in terms of the bottleneck, we're tackling that head on right now. The so what we're actually doing now is we're taking all our parts. So we have tons of parts, right? Which could be everything from like a handle on this cup to the cup itself. Um, they're all separate in our system. We have that's kind of unique in our data set. This since we created all this data ourselves in our proprietary data model, we have all the parts separate. We know their placements. Like it's a pretty unique data set at this point of millions and millions of objects with thousands of parts, and those parts can be customized. That's key. It's not static hit bashing. You can still customize those things. So now we're working on our own AI system that can automatically replace and place those parts in new places. So essentially, you'll get the opportunity to do a piano with wings, or you'll generate a tank, and you'll switch out the barrel for a series of donuts if you want to do crazy stuff like that. So you'll be much closer to that kind of create anything vision.
Right. So you are tackling that aspect of the limited set of assets that you can create, but mixing the different parts
Yeah.
of those single assets. For example, the turrets, the feet, the wheels, the tires, and
Yeah.
the handles of things, and so on.
Exactly. So,
Interesting.
or even stuff like windows and doors. Like there are so many windows and doors in the world, but it's also like it's interesting how close you can get to every single permutation with a few parameters that we have, and then automatically placing them, and you'll get to a lot of different styles. So that's yeah.
So that is not the only AI's, let's say, true AI side, right? There is another one that I want to discuss shortly is about that prompting the 3D asset creation with AI.
Mm-hmm.
But before getting into that, there was another thing that is about the style of the models, right? So you do have, for example, this wackiness slider, right? That helps to have a different stylized look. Now, what are other ways in which people can achieve different styles in Sloyd?
So we make sure that all the types of parts and the objects you can create, they're like the baseline is typically this kind of semi-stylized. So we make sure that you can go fully kind of stylized, cartoony, more chunky, more asymmetrical, all the way to more realistic kind of proportions. So one thing of a style is in the proportions. So we try to handle that way, and then you can prompt on that, and the AI should know, how to customize the object to work within those styles. Then you have the textures, which is obviously we mentioned that might already be out here where we are right now. It's coming very soon. That will handle another big chunk of the style, going from realistic to stylized or cartoony or everything in between. And then you mentioned the wackiness slider, which is kind of cool especially for, obviously it's for kind of more cartoony look where you can make things even more asymmetrical, make it tilt or twist it or taper the whole thing. Like it gives it some wackiness. That's essentially it. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So how it is, so you added also this ability to prompt and instead say, hey, remove these windows or make the building 2-floored, for example.
Yeah.
So how are people currently using right now, and how do you envision that specific feature be used in the future?
So there's a few. So to kind of step back for a second there, it's important to kind of think about what the main use cases are for our system. And I think it's roughly two main use cases. It's a production phase. You just want to speed up your production. You want to be faster at making games or making content in 3D. And then it's the runtime aspect, which is going kind of more back to our initial vision of creating games instantly at runtime in real time. So for the first one, it's just nice to, if you're in the web app or you're using Sloyd through our API or plugins, or you're in Unity, for example, it just makes it faster. You can just be in the flow and just prompt, and because there's no waiting time, you can get and we even have kind of asset pack creation through prompting. So you could say, give me 20 assets for, I don't know, a living room, or 20 different rifles, or 20 whatever, and you get those within a couple seconds. And then you can still customize those either through prompting or the sliders or parameters if you want to. So that's one thing. It just speeds things up because there are a lot of parameters. So it's just easier. The AI is making tens of movements at the same time for you. It's a bit faster than you are probably at doing that. At least faster than me. And then on the runtime aspect, we envision UGC being in the game. I'm a gamer now. I'm a creator inside of a creation platform or a game, and I can actually prompt and create stuff with text, even with voice. We've had users and companies doing that, add a voice to text component, and being in a game, even especially in VR, it's just so, or XR, it's just so magical is the word we've heard, when you're in that world and you can just use your voice and then you're creating stuff that way. It's just very, very exciting.
So, as you mentioned, I'm a big VR fan, right? So whenever and people have been discussing or showing interest in the fact that, okay, we have, of course, these agents that populate this world that can answer us, and that is part of the interaction. Now, the creation has been always a separate thing, and that is also due to the fact that it's not happen at runtime, right? It has these delays that is not just acceptable in a game. I cannot wait 30 seconds, 1 minute to get a 3D assets. That's just how it works. So what kind of, the moment that you unlock that opportunity for developers, for users, so what kind of gameplay, emerging gameplay do you imagine to unlock?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always it's extremely interesting to see the creativity of game developers as well in this. I think we haven't only scratched the surface of what could be done here, because you could do essentially everything from I'm an individual in the game and I'm creating something and I'm just in the flow of creating a city or creating a an environment, to coupling that with game logic, and there's already tons of AI to code and to game mechanics, coupling it automatically with that. Then of course you have more kind of classic procedural mechanics, where depending on the actions within the game, you can generate the content based on that. So maybe you do certain things and the story, you generate a city instead of a forest, for example, around the corner, stuff like that. I think another one that, taking it one step further from that, you have all the kind of AI NPCs and AI kind of storytelling aspects, where there's story of the NPCs and even campaigns in some cases are dynamically created. If you pair that with the content creation itself too, man, that's just crazy to think about, because now you truly have an emergent thing. And then you have the aspect of testing that and making sure you still have an enjoyable experience and not everything is just kind of crazy. So that's something we're kind of throwing that ball up, and we don't have all the answers to that. The good thing about our stuff is it's deterministic. So you can't set it up to be 100% deterministic, so your testing will still be valid. But yeah, I think those are some really, really interesting cases. Oh, and actually one more. We've seen typically in the kind of streaming environments, or you want to in more video creation content, where you have an audience and kind of a presenter or like an entertainer to have the audience be able to prompt and to create stuff in that stream. Maybe it's like within the Fortnite stream, or it could be just in they have virtual avatars or whatever. Just to have fun together that way, where you can just and don't have to worry about performance and waiting time. It's just so many fun.
That's interesting. Wait, so if you're
Yeah.
saying that someone is playing Fortnite, let's imagine, or Roblox, right? One of these, and then at some point the audience starts voting, "Hey, you should start fighting against a tank with wings."
Yeah.
And then there is that tank with wings that has maybe stats, because what would be the stats of a tank with wings? That it's something that you attach on top of it, and then that's it. So basically, that is one way. But the VR, the RPG kind of example was though fascinating, because I think we always think about the dialogue that happens in these 3D worlds, right? And the stories that are told. But very often those stories are connected to the objects that exist in this real world, right? It could be clothing, for example, right? It could be belts or
the house that person lives in, or even the town that person lives in, or
right,
or where that quest takes you, or whatever.
So you manage then to connect the places, props, and environment, right, to actually the narrative layer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm super excited about that use case, because then it just opens up so many use cases. Or so many.
And then honestly, it doesn't need to be VR, of course.
Oh, no.
Everybody wants to experience that and let's say be there and have a procedural generated Skyrim with a story attached to it. That is like pretty interesting premise. Yeah. But on the other hand, everything can happen on a 2D screen, right? And even on a web at that point, because the assets are rather optimized.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other thing is, if you want to just, take it a step back and a bit simpler kind of, just the notion of leveling up objects too, when you have everything parameter controlled. So you're leveling up your sword, for example. Maybe you just, it asks you, there's not like finite. Is that the right? I'm always confused. Like, it's not a stepwise kind of, it could be actually step free, where it's just like, adding more details or becoming bigger and more powerful. Continuous, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, a continuous evolvement of the object itself based on its level. Stuff like that too has not been done. So
we have inspired so far, I hope, some developers to start exploring this. But what kind of tool or infrastructure do you provide them to make this possible?
So there's to do all these like in-game things that we just discussed. We have two main ways. It's our API, which you can plug into anything, and every time you do an update of the object, that's an API call. Or you do so that's essentially a cloud-enabled solution for this. And then for Unity specifically, we have a runtime local generation solution. So you can be, if you're building your game in Unity specifically, then you can do this locally on the device, and it's optimized for that. So you shouldn't need to worry about that. It's optimized to be fast and on low-end devices too, and do this locally on the device. And so the only thing that goes out would be prompting, if you would use that. But you could also just use kind of scripting and rule sets to do all this stuff.
I wanted to have a quick break to remind you that if you like this conversation, you should check all past episodes at xraispotlight.com. Also, if you don't want to miss anything, remember to subscribe to the XR AI Spotlight newsletter, and you will immediately get an updated list with over 200 mixed reality apps you can filter from various fields, weekly in-depth interviews, and one product spotlight personally tested by me right in your mailbox every week. And now, let's get back to the show. And just to be extremely clear and maybe reiterate, one of the things that stopping many studios, either small or big, from using generative AI for their assets creation is the whole IP nightmare and uncertainties and so on, right? So this in no way taps or lean towards that problem, correct?
100% correct. Yeah, that is.
Okay.
It's all clear. It's all our data. We made all of it. There's absolutely no issues on the IP side. So we're very respectful of artists' work, which is why we pay them.
Awesome. That's the way it should be.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so we have discussed a bit also about the asset creation part. So we moved into that runtime engine, and then we discuss also, okay, but you can also be faster while creating 3D assets, maybe for prototyping, blocking out, or trust, and so on. And you mentioned about texturing. That is key when you want to add an element of personalization. So how will people be able to add those textures, and how will that become part of the workflow in case they want to edit or modify the 3D asset afterward?
Okay, so well, in case they want to edit them afterwards, it's exactly the same as today. When you generate an object with Sloyd, you get a UV map that is usable, where all the shapes and parts of the object are laid out consistently. And like a big part of when you do projection texturing, which is what Gen AI solutions use today, you generate textures for a house, for example. You get the UV map, and there's some roof over here, there's some roof over there, and some roof over here, and it's not really meant to be worked on. For us, the roof is like there, and you can change that section of the UV map, so it's how you expect it. So whether or not you generate it with textures that's coming from us, it's very easy to switch up. So through the prompting experience, you would just ask for a certain look, whether it's like kind of a more generalized, like, I don't know, yeah, it's always hard to come up with a good prompt, like I don't know, a cartoony, fun, very colorful house with red bricks and whatever, and then it will give you that, and those are tileable open source textures that pulls from a huge database, and then it's tiling them perfectly on the object, and they even scale properly when you customize the object afterwards. So you can still customize the object. That's pretty cool too, I think. When you got the textures,
Right.
you can still customize the object, and they scale well. So yeah, and then you can obviously change them also in the tool through prompting as well. That might not be in the first version if you go into the website right now, but that will definitely be there. In the Unity plugin, this is even more kind of simple. We have material slots for all, or material groups for all the objects, so you can just set up your own materials with textures that way.
So, and the stylizing part, right? So let's imagine, for me to understand, if I want a ruined wall, right? Am I tapping still into something that is a limited, also finite number, determined number of textures, or are those AI generated?
It will be a mix in the first version. The actual textures are not AI generated, but they're selected and placed through AI. This is to have predictability, to have high quality output, because that's always our first priority, is to have something that's directly usable. It's high definition, that's predictable, and all that stuff. But tileable textures through AI is they're most of the time it works pretty well. There are still some like challenges sometimes to get it perfectly tiling, so that's why we haven't seen the big value add to do that at the start, as long as you have enough textures to select from. But obviously, I think people want that too, just to have even more customization. So we're definitely going to do that as well. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's essentially how it is. Yeah.
So I also would like to understand a little bit, right? Right now, who are the people that are using Sloyd? Is that the indie? Is this the studio, the VFX studios? I mean, can you give us maybe an impression of like who are the people that are leveraging this new way of creating in 3D?
I think it is the most exciting probably at this point for for like the mid-sized and this maybe the smaller ones, mid-sized who want to kind of what's the term, like they want to fight above their weight class or whatever it's called. Like you can do more. You work faster. You can build bigger environments with the same quality as you've done before. That's like our goal there. So I feel like that's where we have the biggest impact, and also in the VR XR space, because of the optimization, mobile games and also web-based games, it's really great for that because of the optimized. We didn't talk about that either, but the LOD side, that's just a parameter that's part of our geometric generation engine. You can take the poly count up and down within that milliseconds. It's instantaneous, that as well. So it's really easy to get the low poly or a very high poly look. We have seen people even do like architectural visualizations. Honestly, like you can do that too. Like the objects are, if you put the some nice textures and nice render on it, we have some great examples of that too. So that's also kind of it's the good thing and the bad thing about a solution like ours, or in 3D, because 3D can be used for so many things. Like you can graphic design, even you have 3D elements there. You have obviously movies and cartoons and that kind of stuff. So we have people using it for that. 3D printing is a huge one. Since we added STL support on the website, we see, I think it was like around 20% of all the exports are in STL. So obviously a lot of people like to print our stuff too. Then you can go into the architecture and the product design, and
there is one thing that I've always wondered. So for me personally, let's say technology, especially when we think about VR and AI, are a way to, let's say, facilitate creativity. So making, for example, someone that is not creating a 3D model, like me, like you, it sounds like, to some extent,
exactly.
but then making them able to start creating in 3D. And the way these two technology kind of like can merge, it's one of the things that is exciting, in a sense that I've seen examples where people are using maybe something that is a bit rough around the edges, created with AI, and then use that as a prompt, as an input for some AI diffusion models, right? We can talk about Runway. So you can generate a 3D asset with Sloyd being a laser gun, right? Why not? Without having any knowledge about 3D, without downloading anything, without any risk of infringing any copyrights, and then use that specific prop as part of your, let's say, movie shots or maybe 3D render, because you can position it and have very high control of the composition, the angle.
Exactly.
Right? And this
I love this. Yeah, exactly.
Have you explored this? Have you thought, are other people experimenting in this direction?
Yeah, I love it. This is I'm laughing because we literally just talked about it yesterday in the team. Like, so it's spot on. I did do some experimentation. I forgot, maybe it was like 9 months ago, where for exactly this, where instead of like because you have like real time drawing to 2D or to images, you can do the same for using 3D assets, as we say, to compose your shot. But with 3D assets, you get some more control that way, and then render like a nice image on top of that. So that's one use case as well. But I agree. Like, if you can bypass the whole rendering aspect, one thing is the like the movie. So now we're getting into maybe a bit more into the future though. Today, obviously,
and that is totally fine. The conversation is evolving in that direction, and then we can kind of like close out with what's coming.
It's interesting too to talk about this, because for sure, like for videos, to have a 3D scene that you can render and with AI video on top, so you can direct like what's in the shot, but the style of it, whether it's realistic or more cartoony or whatever else. I think that's very, very exciting, because you still have that control of where maybe characters are moving or like the space itself. there's also a future you can imagine where games are rendered this way, where because you can already do real-time video generation this way with style transfer. So I think there's definitely a future where you want the speed of creating the scenes and the environments using something like Sloyd, where you space things out, whether it's through rule sets or your manual kind of creation of the scene, or AI, of course, scene creation. And then the render and the style aspect of it comes through an AI renderer in real time. So now, now the whole your question about style and textures and all this stuff, the texture that you would get from us is only kind of directing the AI in this world.
And you know what
Which,
happens is that
yeah.
I think that so there are also two ways of approaching this. One way is like people that will think, okay, this is how I want my game to look, and I
Uh-huh.
want it. I want full control of what's coming out. It should look like this. It should look like this. And I think they are gonna at some point hit a wall because they will try to replicate one on one what is the workflow, and there is nothing wrong about it, right? There is nothing wrong about it. I think there is going to be then another generation of games of creatives that instead will embrace also the limitation and come around with creative solution that they can use to then have emerging gameplays, emerging styles. So where that elements of AI rendering on top of an AI generated low fidelity scene, it's something that is a feature. It's not a bug, right? When part of the story evolves around it.
Yeah.
And I think that we have seen different examples where, for example, low poly look in VR, it becomes kind of like a feature, right? It is part of the look. If you even think about Gorilla Tag, right? I mean, example. Now, also there, the graphic, can we discuss about the graphics? But that is part of the style. So they managed to combine that to obtain what is then still a visually appealing look for the kind of audience they're targeting. So I think that this is where like also the creatives should also like try to find new ways to use this technology and understand what are the limitations, play around with it, and then just do not apply or try to port one-on-one the way they work now to with what this technology have to offer.
Exactly. And that's actually what your question earlier to who this fits the most for. I kind of avoided the AAAs, and it's for that exact reason, because they have a very set way of working that might need to, be challenged a bit in terms of, in terms of the workflow. That said, this is a very interesting thing, because on the one side, we want to have our objects and the output as directly usable as possible and works for that workflow. In the other sense, there are new opportunities here that you can embrace to take full advantage of things. So we could talk about the style and the render and all that stuff we just talked about, but even something as simple as like right now when you do prototyping for a game, you either use like an asset pack or you use obviously like gray boxing. And then you may or may not struggle with like explaining what that concept is. Imagine this is a tank, imagine this is a building, it's just a cube, but never mind, look at how cool we maneuver, which makes sense because you want to prototype the mechanics. Although now when you get into the next stage, everything is kind of built off of sending that over to someone else to then kind of replace those things. And then I imagine like blurring those lines a bit, where you can take the very low poly versions of our objects for the prototyping. So it's still not, performance is still not a thing, and you're still as fast as using cubes or whatever, because you're just kind of grabbing things from our system. But then as you're happy with them, then you add your style. Then you add more polygons, like to bring them up to high poly, and it's literally a pull of a slider, right? And then you may or may not have like, let's say 70% of all those assets are already good to go. You still want to maybe switch out some of the hero assets and whatever. But that's it breaks the workflow a bit and how the suitors are set up, but it could speed up immensely the time to market from prototype to a game.
Exactly. And I think the hardest part is always try to convince people that are working in that conditions, like under all the pressures and whatever, to reevaluate or rethink. And that is
Yeah,
always the biggest challenge, right? And that's why
exactly.
I think that really the biggest opportunity is the small to mid-sized studios that have that capability, have that need, and
To be
have
a bit
more
more,
freedom to
yeah.
explore, right?
And they're looking
So,
for those for that upper hand kind of. Although the bigger studios, they are doing that too. Obviously, there's tons of articles of and interviews with executives and AAAs who are saying the industry is not sustainable. We all know about the crunch time and all the layoffs, and it's prices of games are not going up, but the content and the costs are going up immensely. So efficiency is needed. So yeah, to take advantage of some of these tools, I think is essential. Um, eh, and then you can also do more, like with maybe smaller teams, and bring out more content, bring out more exciting experiences, more interaction too, um, and have more dynamic, engaging experiences this way. I'm excited for this.
absolutely. The in-game side is one of the things that I think I've taken away from this conversation. And so you mentioned texturing is here or
Let's say
almost
it's
here.
out. Let's say it's
It's
out.
out.
Yeah.
It's out. It's out, guys. So go
Yeah.
there to Sloyd and check it out. Link is in the description. But what else? What's coming next?
Well, the long term is in the AI assembly, which I mentioned, taking all those parts so you have even more customization. We're continuing to add more integrations, and so just to make the workflow easier into different tools, whether that's in 3D tools or in engines. Um, I think, and then just a huge part of it too is enabling more organic objects in our system too. We can do that now. We have developed a type of geometry generation that is still real time, but which is organic. It still takes some time for us to kind of hone that down and make it work in the way we want to. But there are some. You can already see the evolution of our objects over time if you've paid attention to us in the last 3.5 years. You can definitely tell that has improved, and it's going to continue to improving. So you have more control, more nice looking objects, the same speed. Probably, I don't think we're gonna get much faster
Slow
than
down.
real time and milliseconds. Actually, that's funny. Like the slowest part of our system through the API and the prompting is the LLM part. That is without that, and you just do it with our system, like without the prompting stuff, it's milliseconds. So maybe that's going to be part of the improvements as well.
Amazing. Thanks. And I think that having also that organic is going to lead to an expansion of the library. So that means more
Yeah,
flexibility because more
yeah.
models, more things that can be made, right? So really
Which
looking
is
forward to it.
which is already true. Like if you went into Sloyd like a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago and you saw like, oh, this particular object isn't looking exactly how I want to, do check back because we continually update stuff, and we especially go after like what most people want. So the most popular types of objects. So yeah,
Perfect. Do you want a specific 3D asset? Message and Andreas
you
either on
can.
LinkedIn or
Honestly,
and then,
we have a channel in our Discord for suggestions. We have every Wednesday we have open sessions in our Discord where people can come and see what we're working on and provide feedback on updates or new parts and generators. So jump in and contribute. We'd be happy to build something for you.
amazing. Andreas, thank you very much for being today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, please leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really means a lot to me, and it's a great support for the show. Till next time.